Libra never enters someone's life in a loud or sudden way. You don't arrive with grand promises or with a need to be seen. You come quietly, like a cool breeze moving through a room that's been holding too much heat, like a soft light turning on late at night, when everything is already tired. Sometimes you don't even realize the moment you arrive, but the other person feels it. They feel safe. They feel heard. They feel that someone is truly listening, without judgment, without pressure, without asking them to become someone they are not. There is something very rare about the way you show up. You don't have to say much. Sometimes you just sit there, in silence, and the space itself begins to slow down. Other people breathe a little easier. Their stories stretch longer, and the things they've never dared to say suddenly find a way out. You're not trying to heal anyone, but the balance you carry naturally creates a place to rest. And strangely enough, the very calm is what makes some people uncomfortable. Because when someone who is used to chaos comes into contact with stability, the first thing they feel is not relief. It's confusion. Your gentleness quietly exposes the sharp edges they've been trying to hide, the anxieties they avoid, the contradictions they ignore, the wounds they've never had the courage to face. You don't point them out. You don't name them, but your presence makes them visible. And not everyone is ready to see the truth of themselves. Some people begin to feel small next to your calm. Some feel exposed, even though you're not holding up a mirror. And some, instead of turning inward to heal, turn outward to resist. They call you confusing, cold, unclear. But beneath all of that, what they're reacting to isn't who you are. It's the loss of control they feel when standing in front of an energy they can't manipulate. Libra often doesn't realize this right away. You tend to question yourself first. Did I say too much or not enough? Did I do something wrong? Did I hurt someone without meaning to? You're used to adjusting yourself to keep the peace, used to stepping back so nothing breaks. But there is a truth you need to hear, slowly and clearly. You did not appear in their life by accident. You arrived at the moment they needed to see the truth, even if they weren't ready to accept it. Some connections are not meant to last. Some meetings exist only to wake us up. And some people enter our lives not to love us completely, but to help us understand our own worth more deeply. Libra often carries that role, the one who opens the door, the one who softens the atmosphere, the one who restores order to emotions that have lost their balance. But that role is not always welcomed with gratitude. If you've ever felt disliked without knowing why, if you've ever sensed someone's attitude towards you shift for no clear reason, pause for a moment and breathe. It's not because you're wrong. It's not because you're not enough. It's because the balance you bring touched something they weren't ready to face. And sometimes, the softest light is what reveals the deepest shadows. You don't need to make yourself smaller so others can feel safe. You don't need to be louder to be accepted. Your presence, exactly as it is already a gift. And as this story continues to unfold, you'll begin to see that your place in other people's lives, whether brief or long-lasting, has always carried a deeper meaning than you ever realized. And from that point on, something very subtle begins to reveal itself. Not loudly, not all at once, but like early morning light slipping through a narrow crack in the door, slow enough not to startle, yet clear enough that it can't be denied. You begin to realize that the way you live, the way you move through the world, often goes against the rushed rhythm around you. Not because you're slow, but because you choose carefully. Not because you fear conflict, but because you understand the cost of letting impulsive emotion take the lead. Libra carries a very quiet kind of strength. You don't need to raise your voice to prove you're right. You don't need to defeat anyone to feel worthy. You understand that inner peace is not built through arguments, and certainly not through winning every exchange of words. And so, more often than not, you are the one who pauses first. Not because you're weak, but because you're aware enough to know what's worth protecting. In a world that often mistakes hardness for strength, your kindness is easily misunderstood. Some see you step back and assume you lack conviction. Some see your silence and believe you're afraid to speak the truth. But very few understand that behind each moment of quiet, there is a deep and deliberate process happening inside you. You see multiple layers of emotion at once. You sense not only what is said, but what remains unspoken. And once you see the full picture, you choose the path that causes the least harm, even when that choice leaves you misunderstood. You don't avoid conflict out of fear. You avoid it because you know conflict rarely heals the deeper wounds inside people. You understand that some battles, even when won, leave echoes that last far longer than anyone expects. And you don't want to be the source of those echoes. Your kindness is not a weak reflex. It is a conscious decision, one that requires far more inner discipline than most people realize. There are moments when you find yourself standing between two opposing currents. On one side, the desire to protect yourself. On the other, the desire to keep everything from falling apart. And often, you place your heart right in the middle, like a fragile point of balance. That choice tires you more than others may ever know because you carry emotional weight no one sees. Yet, it is also what turns you into a safe place for so many lost and weary souls. The world is used to quick reactions, sharp answers, boundaries drawn in haste. But you choose to listen a little longer, to understand a little deeper, to slow down just enough. And that difference leaves many people unsure of where to place you. They're not used to someone who is both gentle and firm. They're not familiar with kindness that has depth, so they label it hesitation. They call it vagueness. They say it lacks clarity, but inside, you know exactly what you're doing. You see more, so you choose differently. You see the consequences of careless words. You notice the cracks in another person's heart, where a single wrong sentence could cause everything to shatter. And you choose to protect what's fragile. Not because you want to please everyone, but because peace matters more to you than winning. As the story continues to move forward, you slowly understand that your kindness doesn't need to be proven. It doesn't require validation to exist. It's part of who you are, a rare form of emotional intelligence in a world that grows louder every day. And when you allow yourself to stand firmly in that gentleness, without apologizing, without explaining, you begin to sense something new. That the choice, once mistaken for weakness, is quietly guiding you toward deeper connections, clearer truths, and a kind of peaceful freedom that only those who truly understand themselves will ever be able to reach. And then, within the quiet you've so often chosen as your companion, something unusual begins to happen. You're not trying to become the center of any room. Yet, when you're present, conversations begin to slow. People speak less, but think more. Surface-level talk quietly loses its grip, making room for gentle pauses where each person starts to hear themselves. You don't ask direct questions. You don't pressure anyone for answers. But your presence feels like a still lake, clear enough to reflect every movement beneath the surface. Libra carries a kind of justice that doesn't need words. You don't judge, but you don't look away either. You see things with rare clarity, far enough not to be pulled into emotion, yet close enough to truly understand. And that balance, whether others want it or not, invites them to look back at their own lives, at how they live, how they love, how they treat themselves, and how they move through the world. Not everyone is ready for that moment. Some people standing in your presence suddenly feel uneasy without knowing why. They sense their inner contradictions being touched, the half-made decisions they once ignored, the values they quietly compromised, the things they knew weren't right, yet chose anyway. You never say it out loud, but your natural integrity brings it all into focus. And for those who lack the courage to look inward, that feeling can be like standing in front of a mirror they're not prepared to face. You never intended to become anyone's mirror. You're simply living in alignment with yourself. But when someone lives honestly, with real balance, they naturally become a point of reflection for others. This isn't a burden you chose. It's the result of refusing to betray your core values. And in a society accustomed to hiding, living truthfully is sometimes mistaken for provocation. Some people choose to step away. Others turn to criticism, to labels, or try to dim the gentle light you carry. Not because you are above them, but because you remind them of their own honest self, the version they abandoned long ago. When people aren't ready to face the truth, they often try to remove whatever reminds them of it. Libra tends to sense this early. You notice the shift in their eyes, in their tone, in the invisible distance that forms between you. And you begin to wonder whether you should be a little less yourself just to make things easier. But deep down, you know that softening the truth has never brought real peace. It only creates a temporary calm and leaves behind cracks that are slow to heal. The justice within you isn't loud, but it is steady, like a compass needle, always pointing in one direction, no matter how the world spins around it. And when others stand before you, they sense that direction instinctively. Some feel relieved because they've finally encountered something clear. Others feel afraid, realizing how far they've drifted from what they once believed was right. You are not responsible for making anyone comfortable with their truth. Your role is not to soothe every unease by sacrificing yourself. Your presence alone, with its quiet grace and integrity, is enough. Those who are ready will heal. Those who are not will resist. And neither response says anything about your worth. They speak volumes about their inner journey. As this current continues to flow, you begin to understand that becoming a mirror by accident is not something to avoid. It's a reminder that you are living in alignment with who you truly are. And in that meaningful silence, a gentle realization settles in, that not every turned-away glance is a loss. Some distance exists only to preserve the truth. And when you allow yourself to stand firmly in that balance, without shrinking, without making yourself smaller, you quietly open a space where deeper, more genuine connections finally have room to form. And from there, another feeling begins to move quietly through the relationships around you. Not loudly, not explosively, but clearly enough that people start to sense you don't belong to the familiar lines they use to divide the world. You don't lean fully to one side. You don't rush to agree just to stay included in a conversation. And you don't join emotional waves simply because everyone else is moving that way. You stand in a place that is distinctly your own, quiet yet steady, where you can see the whole picture without being pulled under. This confuses many people. In environments where loyalty is measured by which side you choose, not choosing can easily be mistaken for distance. Some begin to see you as cold. Others assume you're not committed enough. Some even believe you're keeping space to protect your own interests. What they don't see is what's happening deeper inside you. They don't see that each time you refuse to enter drama, you are choosing to keep the truth from being distorted by temporary emotion. Libra understands the power and the danger of impulsive feelings. You've seen too many relationships collapse because of a single uncontrolled moment. You've witnessed words spoken in anger turn into scars that last for years. And so, you learned how to pause, not to escape, but to observe, not to detach, but to avoid fueling what you know will cause harm later. You don't choose sides because you know the truth never lives on just one side. You understand that every story has layers, that every person carries their own fears, their own motivations. When others rush to conclusions, you listen a little longer. When the crowd demands an immediate reaction, you wait for things to settle. And that slowness, in a world addicted to quick responses, becomes uncomfortable for many. There are moments when you feel the pressure to choose, the pressure to prove you're with them, that you haven't turned away, that you haven't betrayed anyone. But deep inside, you know real loyalty isn't about standing on one side at any cost. It's loyalty to what is right, even when that leaves you standing alone. And you've accepted that loneliness more than once, because you understand that betraying the truth costs far more. You are not cold. You simply don't let emotion make every decision for you. You are not indifferent. You just refuse to be pulled into cycles you know won't lead to resolution. Your calm isn't a lack of feeling. It's the result of lived experience. Experience that taught you that steadiness is a form of courage. A form of courage few people have the patience to develop. When others feel disappointed because you don't react as they expect, that says far more about their need for validation than it does about who you are. You are not responsible for soothing someone else's anger by sacrificing the truth. You don't need to prove loyalty by entering unnecessary battles. Your presence alone, with its clarity and fairness, is already a statement strong enough. And then, within the silence you often keep, something important becomes clear. Not everyone needs to understand you right away. Not every relationship needs to be preserved at any cost. Some people will leave when they realize they can't pull you toward them. Some connections will naturally fade when you no longer play the role they expected, but what remains will be built on real respect, where you don't have to choose a side to be loved. And as this emotional current continues to carry you forward, you begin to feel a deep sense of relief. Relief because you no longer have to divide yourself to fit in. Relief because you understand that loyalty to the truth, even when it makes the path a little lonelier, is opening a more authentic way of living. A space where you are allowed to be fully yourself, calm, whole, and no longer required to explain why you don't belong to any side at all. And as you remain in that place, not leaning to either side, not standing against anyone, something very subtle begins to spread around you. It isn't a kind of presence that demands attention. It's a sense of harmony that's hard to name. It lives in the unhurried rhythm of your voice, in the way you choose your words, so no one feels wounded. In a gaze deep enough to make others feel understood, yet never invaded. You don't try to create this balance. It simply belongs to who you are, formed through years of observing, of adjusting, of choosing peace over victory. Libra often carries an energy that gently softens the space around them. When you enter a room, things seem to rearrange themselves, even though nothing visibly changes. Emotions lose some of their sharp edges. Stories become less aggressive. Life slows down just enough for people to breathe. For those accustomed to living in constant inner tension, that state isn't always comfortable. It's like stepping out of a loud room into an open silence, where everything suddenly becomes clearer than they expected. The balance you carry unintentionally highlights the instability in others. Not because you're perfect, but because you've learned how to live in alignment with yourself. You know when to move forward and when to pause. You don't let emotion control every action, yet you never deny what you feel. That harmony, in a world accustomed to extremes, can be triggering. Some people look at you and feel relieved. Others look at you and feel lacking. For unsettled souls, balance doesn't bring peace right away. It brings comparison. Comparison with rushed decisions they once made, with reactions they later regretted, with a life they keep chasing but have never truly touched. And when that feeling isn't transformed into growth, it easily turns into envy. Not everyone dislikes you. Many simply don't know where to place their emotions when faced with a state they haven't reached yet. They see you remain calm amid the chaos they're struggling with. They see you stay gentle without losing your boundaries. And instead of asking what they might learn from that, they choose to deny its value. Libra often senses those looks, the ones mixed with admiration and discomfort, the looks that want to come closer and push you away at the same time. And there are moments when you wonder whether you should dim your light, blend into the shared chaos, just to breathe more easily. But deep inside, you know this balance isn't borrowed from anyone. It was built through countless moments of self-adjustment, self-healing, and taking responsibility for your inner world. Your beauty doesn't come from being above others. It comes from no longer needing to prove anything. You don't need to win to feel whole. You don't need to dim anyone else for your light to be seen. The harmony you carry is strong enough to exist without comparison. But for those still trapped in a sense of inner lack, it becomes an uncomfortable reminder of what they haven't dared to face. When you allow yourself to remain in that balanced state, without apologizing, without shrinking back, you begin to realize something very gentle. That not every turned-away gaze comes from hatred. Some look away simply because they aren't ready to face what you're living. And within that silence, a different feeling begins to form. The understanding that harmony doesn't need to be defended through resistance, but through continued, honest presence. This current keeps moving, softly, deeply, and as you carry your balance into the interactions that follow, you begin to see that not everyone wants stability. Some need drama to feel alive. Some need conflict to cover the emptiness inside. And as that becomes clearer, you also understand that holding harmony among such differences is never easy. Yet those very differences will continue to test how you listen, how you remain silent, and how you protect your peace in situations where not everyone is ready to respect it. And then, within the very harmony you've protected for so long, something deeply human begins to surface. Longer silences than usual. Moments when you know exactly what you're thinking, what you're feeling, yet you choose to keep it to yourself. Not because you don't have a voice, but because you've grown used to placing shared peace above your own emotions. You understand too well that a single uncontrolled sentence can fracture an entire relationship. And so you choose silence, not once, but many times. There are evenings when you lie awake with yourself, replaying conversations that have already passed. You remember the exact moment you could have spoken up, could have protected yourself, could have set a boundary, but you didn't. You chose to soften instead. You chose to swallow it. You told yourself that if things stayed calmer, it was okay for you to carry a little more. At the time, you didn't feel like you were losing anything. You thought you were keeping the atmosphere gentle, keeping others from being hurt. Libra carries a very quiet capacity for endurance. You don't push back immediately when you're misunderstood. You don't rush to correct how others see you. You trust that time and kindness will speak for you. But there are things that, when left unsaid for too long, don't disappear. They sink deep. They accumulate, slowly, like fine dust settling over the heart. At first, you don't notice. You keep smiling. You keep listening. You keep playing the role of the one who smooths things over. Until one day, you realize you're tired, without knowing why. Your sadness is not loud. It doesn't explode into tears or anger. It lives in a faint sense of emptiness. In the moment, you begin to question your own worth. You wonder whether your silence has taught others that your feelings don't matter, whether always yielding has quietly shown them that you can be overlooked. And instead of blaming anyone, you turn inward again, adjusting yourself one more time. You are not weak. This needs to be said slowly and clearly. You are not weak for being silent. You are not weak for choosing harmony. You are simply someone who has given too much without stopping to ask whether you still had enough. You've grown used to holding other people's emotions, used to becoming the balance point in unsteady relationships. And somewhere along the way, you forgot that you too need to be heard, to be protected, to be understood correctly. There is a quiet courage in not saying everything you think. But every kind of courage needs balance. When silence becomes a habit, it stops being a choice and turns into prolonged self-sacrifice. And your body, your mind, begins to send signals. A nameless exhaustion. A gentle distance from things that once brought you joy. A feeling of being present, but not fully seen. What matters is this: that silence does not make you more noble or more lovable in the eyes of those who do not truly value you. It only moves you further away from yourself. And in a very quiet moment, you begin to realize that harmony should not be built by abandoning your own emotions. True peace does not require you to disappear. When you allow yourself to breathe more deeply, to listen to yourself more closely, something very gentle begins to happen. You no longer stay silent out of fear of losing someone. You stay silent only when it truly serves you. You begin to tell the difference between yielding from love and yielding from fear. And that boundary, though delicate, brings a new sense of steadiness. The emotional current continues to move, but it no longer weighs you down as before. You keep your natural gentleness without placing it above your own worth. And within that subtle shift, you begin to feel something else taking shape. A truth. That some things, if never spoken, can never be healed. And as you allow yourself to be more fully present, not just as the keeper of peace, but as a whole human being with real emotion, you move closer to a very quiet kind of freedom. A freedom where peace no longer comes from endurance, but from living honestly. And it's exactly when you begin to fully show up for your own emotions that a very subtle truth starts to reveal itself. Not loudly, but clearly enough that you can no longer ignore it. What unsettles many people about you has never been who you are. It's the fact that you are not easily pulled. You don't react according to familiar scripts. You don't rush into anger so others can feel powerful. You don't hurry to explain yourself just to reassure them that you're still within their control. You remain there, calm, listening, thinking, and only then choosing how to respond. And that pause leaves many people confused, Some are used to controlling the atmosphere through strong emotion. They're accustomed to pushing others into reacting immediately. But with you, that doesn't work. You don't allow someone else's anger to become your own. You don't let their anxiety decide your behavior. You hold an inner space wide enough to observe everything before stepping in. And it's that space that leaves those who rely on others' reactions feeling lost. When they can't control you, they begin to name you in ways that feel safer to them. They call you cold. They say you're hard to read. They label you distant or even selfish. Those labels aren't meant to describe the truth. They exist to soothe their own discomfort. Because if they can place you into a negative frame, they don't have to face the reality that the problem isn't you, but the loss of control within themselves. Libra often realizes this too late. You tend to question yourself first. You wonder if you're too guarded, too calm, too independent. You consider whether you should soften more, move closer, respond more visibly so others won't feel abandoned. But over time, you begin to notice a pattern. No matter how much you adjust, those who need control will never feel satisfied, because what they're seeking isn't connection, it's emotional power. You aren't difficult to manipulate because you're detached. You aren't unfeeling. You've simply learned how to stay centered. You've been pulled by emotion enough times to understand that rushed reactions rarely lead anywhere good. You choose clarity over impulse. You choose silence when it's needed and words when they're grounded. That doesn't make you distant. It makes you free. For those who live through control, your freedom is unsettling. They don't know what to do when you don't follow their unspoken rules. They don't know how to respond when you don't argue, don't cling, don't beg. So they turn away. Not because you lack value, but because you no longer serve their need for control. And yes, that can hurt. Deeply. Especially when you believed you were building something genuine. But within that pain, there is a liberating truth waiting to be seen. That someone leaving because they can't control you is not a loss. It's a refinement. It clears space for relationships that don't rely on power to exist. Spaces where you are respected for who you are, not for how you react. When you allow yourself to stand firmly in that calm, without shrinking, without apologizing for not meeting others' expectations, you begin to feel a very quiet strength. A strength that doesn't need proof. A strength that doesn't require confrontation. It simply exists, steady and clear. And within that presence, you slowly understand that not everyone who turns away is an enemy. Some leave simply because they can't walk beside you on a path that no longer has room for manipulation. The emotional current keeps moving, but now it carries a new clarity. You begin to look back on past relationships with different eyes, softer, deeper, and with less self-blame. You realize that keeping yourself out of emotional games is a rare form of self-respect. And as that truth settles within you, a gentle question begins to arise. If you no longer need to be controlled in order to be chosen, then which connections do you truly want to invite into your life from here on? And then, after all those quiet collisions, a very gentle awareness begins to stay with you. Not like a rigid conclusion, but like the feeling of finally sitting down after a long journey, where you no longer have to prove anything. You begin to understand that you spent too many years asking why others didn't like you. Why simply being yourself seemed to create distance. But over time, that question grows heavy. It no longer leads you to truth. It only keeps you trapped in self-doubt. Libra was never born to please the world. You were born to carry balance, like a slow breath amid constant motion. You didn't arrive to be loved by everyone, but to remind us that another way of living exists. A way where kindness doesn't need noise, where fairness doesn't require competition, where peace is not a reward for the winner, but a state reached by those brave enough to live honestly. When you begin to release the question of why they dislike you, a very quiet space opens. And inside that space, for the first time, you turn toward a more important question. Are you betraying yourself just to be accepted? Are you shrinking your truth to hold on to connections that no longer fit? That question doesn't hurt. It brings clarity. It helps you see the difference between real love and dependence, between healthy connection and silent sacrifice. You start to realize that not everyone who leaves is a loss. Some leave so you can finally breathe. Some turn away so you no longer have to live under constant evaluation. And some silences exist only so you can hear your inner voice more clearly. The relief you feel doesn't come from being liked. It comes from no longer trying to become something you are not. The peace you've been searching for was never outside you. It doesn't live in praise. It doesn't live in approval. It lives in the moment you stop blaming yourself for not fitting everywhere. It lives in allowing yourself to stand firmly in your core values, even when that makes the path feel lonelier. You don't need a crowd to know you're right. You only need deep agreement with yourself. Libra carries a natural gift for healing, but that gift becomes whole only when you stop forgetting yourself. When you treat yourself with the same fairness you offer others. When you listen to your own needs with the same patience you've always given the world. And when you do that, you no longer feel the need to explain why you choose quiet, why you don't join meaningless battles, why you walk a softer path. There may still be people who don't understand you. There may still be judgmental glances, but they no longer shake you the way they once did, because you now know who you are when no one is watching. You've touched a kind of peace that doesn't depend on being loved or disliked. A peace that is quiet, real, and lasting. And within that stillness, you begin to understand that your role was never to please the world. It was to live your truth, so those who are ready can recognize themselves in your presence. Not everyone will stay, but those who do will stay for who you truly are, not for your silent sacrifices. And that is where the balance you carry finally finds a place to rest.